Tonight, step into a cold medieval world where mirrors were more than simple objects of beauty. In the Middle Ages, a reflection could be seen as a warning, a temptation, or even a doorway to something unseen. People covered mirrors after death, feared what might appear behind them, and believed polished glass could reveal truths the eye was never meant to see. So before we begin, please like this video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy calm medieval stories like this. Now, settle in. Lower the lights, and let's uncover the chilling truth about mirrors in the Middle Ages. Hey guys, tonight you find yourself standing ankle-deep in cold mud before the western gate of a medieval town, where the last daylight leaks away behind crooked roofs and the river mist creeps low across the road. Your boots are wet, your cloak smells faintly of horse and rain, and somewhere beyond the wall a bell tolls with the slow patience of something that has never once cared whether anyone is comfortable. Smoke hangs in the rafters of the gatehouse. Damp straw clings to the stones. Torchlight shivers along the iron hinges, and a cart horse breathes clouds into the winter air as if politely trying to become a dragon. Medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience. You feel the chill bite through your sleeves and understand, with some honesty, that you probably would not last a week out here, not without luck, wool, and a suspicious amount of boiled turnip. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what the local time is where your own night has found you. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You draw your cloak closer and step forward with the other late arrivals, joining a small line of travellers waiting beneath the gate arch. Above you, the portcullis is raised but not forgotten, its iron teeth hanging like a dark thought over everyone's heads. A guard in a fur-lined cap leans on his spear and looks at each face with the weary suspicion of a man who has spent all day deciding whether strangers are worth the trouble of letting in. Beside him, a lantern throws a yellow pool across the mud, catching the silver rings of rainwater around your boots. The town beyond the gate is no grand city of marble and triumph, no bright kingdom from a song. It is a tight huddle of timber houses, plaster walls, sagging upper stories, narrow alleys, and gutters that remember every pig, horse, and careless market-goer who has passed that week. The smell arrives before the view does wood smoke, wet wool, old fish, stable straw, spilled ale, and the faint sour breath of many people living very close together under roofs that leak when offended. Somewhere. A cookpot bubbles. Somewhere else. A dog barks as if deeply involved in town politics. You tell the guard your business in the simplest possible terms. You're a traveller bound for the Abbey Road at dawn, carrying no weapon finer than an eating knife, and no treasure greater than a loaf gone hard at the edges. He glances at your bundle, then at your face, then at the road behind you, where the twilight has thickened into blue-black shadow. No one can quite agree whether it is worse to arrive at a town gate after curfew or just before it, but every traveller knows both options make guards feel important. At last he waves you in. You pass under the arch, beneath old stone blackened by generations of smoke, and enter the town at dusk. The street slopes downward toward a market square, its packed earth softened by rain into a wide ribbon of mud. Boards have been laid across the worst places, though several sink underfoot with a sound like a tired cow sighing. Men and women hurry past with baskets, bundles, firewood, and anxious faces. A girl in a patched hood pulls a goat away from a cabbage stall. A baker shutters his window. A woman shakes, rushes from the doorway of a hall, scattering bits of straw, herbs, and old crumbs into the street. Inside, you glimpse the glow of a hearth and the dark beams overhead, soot blackened low enough to punish the tall. The bell tolls again from a church tower hidden behind roofs. It is not the bright ringing of celebration, but the dull evening sound that tells hands to stop their work, shopkeepers to count their coins, and honest people to go indoors before dishonest people remember the streets are empty. In this world, bells are clocks, warnings, prayers, and gossip, all made of bronze. They say more before supper than some men say in a month. You follow the flow of bodies toward the square, where the last market stalls are folding into the damp evening. A fishmonger packs smoked eels into a covered basket. A potter wraps cracked bowls in straw. A man selling pilgrim badges shaped like scallop shells tucks them into a leather pouch, muttering that the toll collector takes more from a man than the saints ever asked. Nearby, a peddler lowers a cloth over a tray of small shining things, and the movement catches your eye. There, beneath the linen, you see a flash. Not gold, not silver exactly, something colder. A small polished mirror no larger than your palm set in dark wood. It shines only for a breath before the cloth covers it, but the sight of it lingers in your mind like a candle flame seen after closing your eyes. In your own age, a mirror is ordinary, almost too ordinary to notice. Here, it is not. Here, a clear reflection is a luxury, a curiosity, sometimes a danger, and sometimes a sermon waiting to happen. Most folk know themselves by touch, by memory, by the blurry gleam of water in a bucket, by a lover's smile, by a barber's careful hands, or by someone unkind saying they look tired, which, to be fair, is a medieval form of public health announcement. Glass mirrors exist, but they are rare and costly, and many are small, dim, or backed with metal that darkens with time. More common are polished bronze, steel, or tin, burnished until they give back a face softened and warped by light. A noblewoman may own one. A wealthy merchant may boast of one. A monastery may keep one locked away. Not always because it is valuable, but because anything that encourages people to stare at themselves too long is bound to attract a sermon. Some swear that mirrors show more than the face. Some say they flatter pride, and pride is a door through which worse things enter. Others whisper that a mirror catches a trace of the soul, or confuses the dying, or allows wandering spirits to peer back through the world's thin places. No one can quite agree whether such tales are warnings, superstition, priestly caution, or simply the old fear of seeing yourself too clearly when the room is dark and the candle is nearly spent. You move on, but the flash stays with you. The square narrows into a lane beside a stone wall, where runoff trickles between the cobbles. A cat slips from one shadow to another. Above, laundry hangs stiff in the cold, and an old woman leans from a window to call someone inside before the night air ruins their lungs, their manners, or both. You pass a public oven, its heat fading, and a pair of boys carrying coarse bread on a wooden board. One has flour on his cheek, the other stares at you as if travellers are less believable than saints. The town watch gathers near the church steps. Their spears are mismatched, their cloaks are damp, and their confidence seems mostly borrowed from the fact that they are standing together. Behind them, the church door is open just wide enough to show beeswax candles burning before a painted saint. The saint's long eyes watching over the square with the calm expression of someone who has never had to pay market tolls. As you slow near the steps, you notice people speaking in clusters. Their voices are low, but the same words travel from mouth to mouth. The Lord's Hall, a mirror, the steward's daughter, a face in the glass. You do not catch the whole tale at first. Medieval rumours, like medieval roads, arrive broken, muddy, and full of unexpected holes. One woman says the young lady saw a corpse behind her shoulder, though the chamber was empty. Another says she saw her own face older by 40 years. A third insists it was not her face at all, but the face of a dead aunt who had once hidden coins in the chimney. This last detail, everyone seems to agree, is probably the most believable part, because dead relatives and hidden coins are two subjects on which village imagination is very well trained. You step aside as a monk passes down the lane with his hood low and his hands tucked into his sleeves. A smear of ink darkens one finger, and his sandals are so wet they make a soft slap against the stones. He pauses beneath the church eaves and speaks with the watchman in a voice too quiet for you to hear. The watchman crosses himself. The monk looks toward the hill where the Lord's Hall rises beyond the rooftops, its upper windows glowing faintly in the dusk. For a moment the lane seems to still. Then a cartwheel strikes a rut. Someone curses mildly. The dog resumes barking, and life goes on because in the Middle Ages even ominous rumours must make room for cabbage, rain, and unpaid debts. You find shelter beneath the overhang of a timbered house and watch the town settle into night. Shutters close one by one. Smoke thickens. The bell sounds once more, and its echo moves over the roofs, along the lanes, into the yards where hens mutter in their sleep. You can feel hunger now, low and ordinary. So you take a piece of coarse bread from your bundle and soften it with a mouthful of thin ale from a stoppered flask. It is not a feast, but it is food. And out here that distinction is mostly poetry. A man beside you, wrapped in a cloak patched at both elbows, notices your gaze drifting toward the hill. "You heard then," he says. You answer that you heard only pieces. He nods, pleased to own a better version. Every town has such a man, and he is always waiting for an audience the way a spider waits for flies, though with more damp wool involved. He tells you that the mirror came from the south, carried by a merchant who swore it was made by Venetian hands, or perhaps Flemish, or perhaps by a Jewish craftsman in a city none of them can pronounce. Those who tell the tale never fully agree. It was bought for the Lord's wife, placed in her chamber, and covered at night according to old custom, because an uncovered mirror in darkness is thought by some to invite restless things. He lowers his voice. But last night, he says, it uncovered itself. You look at him. The rain ticks softly from the eaves. He seems satisfied with the effect and continues. A servant found the linen cloth on the floor before dawn. The lady would not speak for an hour. The steward's daughter wept. The household priest was called, then the monk from the abbey, then a woman who knows herbs, then another woman who claims to know when herbs are not enough. This is, apparently, the correct order of medieval crisis management: priest, monk, herbs, and someone's alarming aunt. You ask what was seen. The man shrugs, but not casually. A death, he says, or a warning, or vanity punished. Depends who is telling it. Above the rooftops, the hall windows glow like watchful eyes. You cannot see the mirror, of course. It is far away, hidden behind stone, oak doors, rush-strewn floors, and frightened servants. Yet you feel the idea of it waiting there, bright and cold under its linen cloth. A thing made to show truth, perhaps, or temptation, or nothing more than a warped face in candlelight, given power by fear, exhaustion, and a long winter evening. Even now, it's hard to tell whether the mirror holds a mystery, or whether the mystery is simply what people bring to it. The patched man points you toward an alehouse near the lower square, where travellers may find a bench, a bowl of pottage, and a roof that only leaks in 2 places, which in this weather counts as refinement. You thank him and step back into the lane. Mud grips your soles. The church bell fades. Somewhere above, the Lord's Hall keeps its light, and as you make your way toward the alehouse door, with smoke curling from its chimney and the smell of onions drifting warmly through the cold, you cannot help glancing at the darkened windows you pass, where every pane of horn, glass, or polished darkness gives back just enough of your own shadow to make you wonder whether you're walking alone. You reach the alehouse just as the rain begins to thicken, not into a proper storm, but into that stubborn medieval drizzle that seems less like weather and more like a personal grudge from the sky. The sign above the door swings on a rusty hook, painted with what may once have been a red boar, though time, smoke, and optimism have turned it into something closer to a wounded turnip. You duck beneath it and push inside, bringing with you a small gust of cold air, wet wool, and road mud. At once warmth folds around you. Not clean warmth, exactly. Not the gentle, polished warmth of a modern room with sensible walls and no livestock nearby. This is hearth warmth, smoky and uneven, crawling from a broad fire where damp logs hiss and spit into the ash. The rafters above are soot black, low, and hung with bunches of drying herbs, old nets, and a few strips of meat that sway faintly whenever the door opens. Rushes cover the packed floor, sweetened with lavender and meadowsweet in places, though in other places they have clearly surrendered to ale, boots, and history. You pause near the entrance while your eyes adjust. The room is crowded with travellers, carters, townsmen, 2 women with baskets of onions, a wool merchant with a beard like a sleeping squirrel, and a pair of pilgrims wearing tin badges on their cloaks. A brown dog lies near the hearth, pretending to sleep but lifting one eye to judge you. It is the same dog, perhaps, that barked in the street. Or perhaps all medieval dogs are born with the same opinion of strangers. The alewife sees you standing there and points with her ladle toward a bench. No ceremony, no welcome. Hospitality here has the softness of a thrown shoe, but it is hospitality all the same. You make your way between elbows and stools, stepping over a puddle whose origin is better left uninvestigated, and sit where the bench leaves half a person's worth of space. A wooden bowl arrives before you, filled with pottage thickened with peas, onions, and whatever grain had the misfortune to be available. Beside it comes a trencher of coarse bread, hard enough at the crust to serve as a minor building material. You do not complain. The steam rises into your face, carrying the smell of salt, leek, and hearth smoke, and your cold hands remember they are attached to a living body. Around you, talk moves like smoke low, curling, never quite still. Someone complains about the market toll. Someone else says the reeve has been measuring grain with a dishonest scoop. A carter swears his wheel broke because a hare crossed the road from the wrong side, and several people nod, because no one can quite agree whether hares are unlucky, enchanted, or merely rude. In this world, a hare can ruin your morning without even trying, which is more than can be said for many officials who try very hard. Then the talk bends, as you knew it would, toward the mirror. It begins with a woman near the fire, her sleeves rolled back, her hair wrapped in a linen coif. She says her grandmother never allowed any polished thing to remain uncovered after dusk. Not a mirror, not a basin of still water, not even the polished back of a spoon. Some swear that sleeping beside an uncovered reflection thins the wall between the body and the soul, and that dreams may wander out and fail to find their way back before dawn. She says this very calmly while cutting onions with a knife sharp enough to settle any theological disagreement. The wool merchant snorts into his cup. He says mirrors are only metal and glass is only sand made proud by fire, a fine phrase, though he looks pleased enough with it that you suspect he's been waiting all week to use it. Yet even he admits that too much staring into a mirror is unwholesome. Priests say vanity fattens the devil's purse. Mothers say it makes girls slow at chores. Barbers say it makes men notice bald spots, which is bad for morale and worse for conversation. A pilgrim across the table leans closer. His cloak is crusted with road dust, and his hat carries a little lead badge from a shrine far to the west. He tells of a village where they turned every mirror to the wall when someone lay dying, so the departing soul would not be trapped in its own reflection. Another pilgrim answers that in her country they cover mirrors after a death because the dead are confused at first and may mistake the shining surface for a door. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, but all agree the cloth must be linen if the household can afford it, wool if it cannot, and an old flour sack if grief has arrived before laundry day. You dip your bread into the pottage and listen. The alehouse grows softer as night settles. Outside, rain taps the shutters. Inside, the fire shifts and collapses inward with a sigh. A boy with a broom stirs the rushes near the door and scatters fresh herbs, more for hope than cleanliness. A man near the wall rubs his swollen knuckles with a salve of goose fat and rosemary, muttering that a wise woman told him to wear a copper ring against joint pain. No one challenges this. Medieval medicine has many roads, and most of them pass through either a garden, a prayer, or an animal part best not mentioned during supper. At the far end of the room, beneath a shelf of clay cups, the patched man from the eaves has found a new audience. He tells the story of the Lord's mirror again, but it has grown during the walk from the street. Now the mirror did not merely uncover itself. Now it rang softly, like a bell beneath water. Now the steward's daughter saw not only death, but the shape of a coffin candle burning blue. Now the lady of the hall fainted. Though another listener says noble women faint whenever the household accounts are read aloud, so this proves little. You try not to smile into your bowl. Still, the unease remains. For all the jokes, for all the ale and onion steam, mirrors hold a strange place in this age. They belong to the edge between usefulness and sin. A polished steel mirror helps a barber trim a beard, a lady fasten a veil, a surgeon inspect a wound, a monk illustrate a sermon about the soul. Yet the same object invites suspicion. It reverses the world. It makes left into right. It gives back an image that moves when you move and vanishes when darkness falls. To people raised among saints' relics, charms against fever, blessed candles, and tales of demons hiding in ordinary things, such a surface is not easily dismissed. Even now, it is hard to tell whether fear of mirrors begins in religion, old folk belief, plain rarity, or the shock of seeing one's own face clearly in a world where most surfaces are dull. Perhaps all of these mingle like smoke beneath the rafters. The alewife comes by with more small ale, thin and safe enough for daily drinking, though not strong enough to make the benches any softer. She hears the mirror talk and clicks her tongue. She says the trouble with noble households is that they buy southern luxuries, then act surprised when southern luxuries behave like strangers. Good English oak, she adds, rarely shows you a dead aunt at midnight. It is a comforting thought. In the way a locked door is comforting even when you're not sure what stands outside. A sudden knock strikes the alehouse door. Conversation lowers at once. The dog by the hearth lifts his head. The alewife turns. Rain whispers against the shutters. The door opens, and the ink-stained monk steps in from the dark. His hood is wet, his face pale with cold, and his fingers are tucked into his sleeves as before. He pauses in the doorway while the room watches him, and in that brief hush you hear the distant bell from the Abbey Road, faint but clear beyond the town walls. The monk's gaze moves across the benches, over the pilgrims, the wool merchant, the alewife, and finally rests near your table. He asks whether any traveller here is bound toward the abbey at first light. The patched man stops mid-sip. You feel the steam from your bowl fade against your face. The monk says the guest house has room if one leaves before the gates shut fully, and that the road is safer in company. He does not mention the mirror. He does not need to. The whole room has already placed it between you like a covered object on a table. You finish the last of your pottage, slow and careful. Outside, the rain keeps falling. Inside, the fire paints every cup, knife, and watchful eye with a trembling orange gleam. And when you rise to follow the monk back into the wet lane, you catch your own reflection for one brief instant in the dark ale pooled at the bottom of your wooden cup. It is blurred, small, and quickly gone. Still, you're glad when the alewife takes the cup away. You step back into the lane behind the monk, and the alehouse door closes softly at your shoulders, shutting away the fire, the onion steam, and the particular comfort of benches that hurt less than standing. The night receives you with wet hands. Rain beads on your hood, slips down your neck, and gathers along the hem of your cloak until the wool hangs heavier than good sense. Ahead, the monk walks with his head bent, sandals whispering and slapping through the mud, as if he has long ago made peace with discomfort, and discomfort has not returned the favour. The town is dimmer now. Most shutters are closed. Thin lines of candlelight glow between boards. From somewhere inside a house, a baby complains at the world in a small, determined voice. From another, someone sings one sleepy line of a hymn, forgets the rest, and lets the tune collapse into coughing. The smell of wet straw, chimney smoke, and damp timber rests low in the street. You pass beneath a hanging sign. Then beneath a beam so low it seems designed by a carpenter with a grudge against tall pilgrims. The monk does not speak for a while. He only lifts one hand now and then to warn you of a rut, a loose stone, a place where wastewater has made the lane shine black. You follow carefully. Medieval streets are full of moral lessons, most of them taught through the ankles. At last, when the alehouse murmur has faded behind you and the church tower stands as a black block against a clouded sky, he says, "You heard talk of the mirror." It is not a question, so you do not answer like one. You say that everyone heard it. Even the dog seemed to have an opinion. A faint sound escapes him. It might be a laugh, though it is so small and tired that it could also be a prayer that lost its way. Dogs are less troubled by glass, he says. They know the nose tells more truth than the eye. This, you think, is probably the wisest thing said all evening. You walk beside the churchyard wall, where old stones lean in the wet grass and wooden crosses darken under the rain. The monk tells you his name is Brother Anselm, though he says it as if names are temporary conveniences and ink lasts longer. He serves in the abbey scriptorium, copying psalters, accounts, letters, and occasionally legal documents for people who cannot read but very much want their enemies to know they have hired someone who can. His fingers are indeed ink-stained, not merely from tonight, but deeply, permanently. The black worked into the cracks of his skin like winter into old stone. He was called to the Lord's Hall before dusk, not by the Lord himself, who is away judging a boundary dispute involving 3 fields, 2 angry cousins, and a ditch no one remembers digging. The summons came from the household priest, who feared scandal, and from the lady's steward, who feared blame, and from a maidservant who simply feared the mirror and therefore may be the most sensible of them all. You turn with him into a lane that climbs toward the Abbey Road. The wall beside you changes from town stone to older masonry, patched with brick, moss, and the occasional stubborn fern. The monk's lantern swings in his hand, making the puddles gleam like strips of tarnished metal. In each one, the world lies broken, a crooked roof, a slice of dark sky. The bent flame of the lantern. You avoid looking too long. Brother Anselm notices, "No one can quite agree whether fear makes mirrors dangerous," he says, "or whether mirrors merely give fear a place to stand." The line sounds practiced, but then monks practice many things: prayers, pen strokes, silence, and the art of saying something unsettling in a calm voice. You ask what he saw in the hall. He does not answer at once. Instead, he tells you how men in the schools speak of mirrors. Some call them instruments of natural philosophy. A smooth surface, properly polished, receives and returns the species of visible things. Also learned men like to say while making hand gestures that would confuse a goose. Others use mirrors in sermons, saying the soul should be polished by confession until it reflects divine light. A mirror may teach humility, because it shows decay. It may teach vigilance, because it reveals stains. It may also teach vanity, because people are people, and if given a polished surface, they will check whether their hair is behaving, even during a moral lesson. In the abbey, he says, the prior keeps a small steel mirror locked in a chest with medical instruments. It is used when a brother has an eye complaint, a swelling near the mouth, or a tonsure that has gone dangerously uneven. This last danger is not in the rule of Saint Benedict, but among monks it carries social weight. Once a novice stared into it so long that the infirmarian struck the table with a spoon and told him Narcissus had drowned for less. Some swear that the boy then refused to look into any basin for a month, which made washing even less popular than usual. You pass the last houses. The town gate behind you is being drawn shut, iron and timber groaning in the rain. Ahead, the road bends toward the abbey, whose tower is hidden beyond the darkness of fields and low orchards. A ditch runs beside the path, swollen with runoff. Somewhere a horse stamps in a shed. Somewhere a woman bars a door with an iron key, the sound clear and final. Brother Anselm says that the mirror in the Lord's Hall is finer than any he has seen. Not large by the standards of kings, perhaps, but clear enough to trouble an honest heart. It is backed with some bright metal under glass, framed in carved walnut, and small flowers are painted in red and blue around the edge. The lady received it as a gift from her brother, who trades in cloth and dyes near the coast. He swore it came across the sea wrapped in felt, packed between rolls of silk, and blessed by a priest before sale. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the blessing happened before or after the price was raised. The mirror was kept in the lady's chamber, covered after dusk by a linen cloth. This was not unusual. Some households cover mirrors to guard against vanity at night. Some do it to keep the silvering from damp. Some do it because grandmothers have a way of making customs law without troubling any court. But last night, just before the bell for matins, the steward's daughter went to stir the chamber fire and found the cloth on the floor. The lady woke. The girl screamed. By the time servants came, the mirror had been turned to the wall. You ask softly what the girl said she saw. The monk's lantern creaks on its ring. Rain ticks on the oiled parchment stretched over the frame. She said, he answers, that the mirror showed the room as it would be after burial candles were lit, the bed empty, the rushes fresh, a bowl of rosemary water on the chest, and behind her, where no one stood, a man with river mud on his face. The road seems colder. A practical part of you wishes to say that candlelight lies, that fear multiplies shadows, that a half-waking girl before dawn might see almost anything in polished glass. But here, walking past winter fields under a hood heavy with rain, such tidy thoughts feel less sturdy than they should. This world is full of dim rooms, tired eyes, whispered prayers, and objects handed from one life to another until memory clings to them like smoke. A mirror does not need to be magic to become dangerous. It only needs to be rare, bright, and present when people are afraid. Brother Anselm continues toward the Abbey Road, and you keep pace. He tells you the household priest wanted the mirror sprinkled with holy water. The lady wanted it removed. The steward wanted it locked away until the Lord returned, because servants are blamed for lost treasures and sometimes even for treasures that behave badly. The old nurse wanted it buried at a crossroads with salt, which is not an approved church procedure, though the monk admits it has a pleasing decisiveness. Medieval problems often invite medieval solutions, and a shovel is a wonderfully persuasive argument. When Brother Anselm examined the mirror, he saw only himself, tired eyes, wet hood, ink on his finger, a monk who had missed supper. He saw the chamber behind him, the coffer, the bed curtains, the servant girl shivering near the door. Yet he also saw that the frame had been scratched along the back, not by accident, but with small marks under the wood lip. He could not read them by candlelight. They might be a maker's sign. They might be merchant marks. They might be charms, even now. It is hard to tell whether ordinary scratches become mysterious because they are hidden, or whether hidden things are scratched there for a reason. The Abbey bell sounds in the distance. One slow note, then another. The road opens beyond the last hedge, and the Abbey appears as a dark mass beyond Whetfield's tower, roof line, outer wall, and a few small lights burning in high windows. The sight brings relief, though not warmth yet. Monasteries are not always comfortable, but they are built of routine, and routine has a way of making fear sit down and behave itself. A lay brother waits at the outer gate with a lantern. He nods to Brother Anselm, then looks at you with the measured curiosity of a man who has seen many soak travellers and ranked them by how much trouble they are likely to be. Behind the gate, the yard smells of hay, damp wool, stable straw, and cabbage soup drifting from the kitchen range. Somewhere inside, the community is stirring for night prayer, feet moving over cold stone, robes brushing, doors opening with soft wooden complaints. You enter under the arch. As the gate closes behind you, the town disappears into rain and darkness. The monk leads you across the yard toward the guest house, where a small fire burns and travellers may sleep under wool blankets that have known many strangers and judged none of them kindly. Near the guest house door, beneath the eaves, stands a bucket full of rainwater. The lantern passes over it, and for a moment, before the ripples break, you see your face below you. Pale, hooded, warped by the trembling surface. Then the water shivers, and you are gone. Brother Anselm opens the oak door and gestures you inside. You step into the monastery guest house with rain on your shoulders and mud on your boots, and the room receives you with the plain, blessed mercy of a roof. It is not a fine room. No minstrel would sing of it unless paid in advance. The walls are whitewashed but smoke-stained near the beams. The floor is stone-strewn with tired rushes, and the narrow windows admit more cold than view. Yet a hearth glows at the far end, and that is enough to make the place seem almost gentle. A few travellers already sit near the fire, arranged in the half-silent manner of people who do not know one another, but have all agreed that warmth is more important than conversation. A pilgrim woman dries her hem over a stool. A carter with a wrapped knee dozes with his chin on his chest. Two merchants sit shoulder to shoulder, counting little stacks of coin under their breath, proving that even in a holy house silver can inspire devotion. Near the wall, a young novice sets wooden bowls on a trestle table, moving carefully, as if the bowls are sacred vessels and not simply bowls that have survived many years of cabbage soup. Brother Anselm speaks quietly with the guest master, an older monk whose eyebrows look strong enough to thatch a cottage. The guest master nods toward you, then toward the fire, and says that travellers may have broth, bread, and a place on the benches until after matins. His voice is kind, but practical. Monastic charity is real, yet it has a schedule, and heaven help the soul who interferes with both. You sit where you're told, because in monasteries this is nearly always the wisest course. Steam rises from a bowl of thin broth flecked with leeks and barley. A heel of coarse bread waits beside it, rough against your fingers, warm at the torn middle. You eat slowly, feeling the heat settle into you. Around the room, wet cloaks hang from pegs, boots stand near the hearth in pairs and lonely singles. The air smells of smoke, wool, damp hay, beeswax, and that deep monastery scent of old stone, ink, boiled vegetables, and patience. Then you notice the covered mirror. It stands near the hearth on a small shelf above a basin, no larger than a handspan, hidden beneath a square of undyed linen. The cloth is weighted at the corners with 4 little knots, as if someone has learned from experience that fabric alone cannot be trusted. Nothing about it moves. Nothing shines. Yet every traveller in the room seems to know it is there in the way people know where a sleeping dog lies, or where the roof leaks, or where a difficult relative has chosen to sit at a feast. You look away first. This feels sensible. The pilgrim woman notices and smiles without much joy. They cover it here too, she murmurs. The carter opens one eye. They cover anything that looks back. The guest master, passing with a candle, says mildly that the mirror is used for shaving, wounds, and small infirmities of the face, not for frightening honest folk after sundown. He says this with the calm of a man who has explained the same thing many times and been believed by almost no one. No one can quite agree whether his confidence makes the covered cloth less troubling or more so. Brother Anselm returns and sits across from you, warming his ink-stained fingers around a cup of small ale. The firelight hollows his face. Behind him, shadows climb the wall and fold themselves among hanging cloaks. Outside, the abbey bell begins to mark the deep night, each note rolling through stone passages, over the yard and into the guest house as slowly as breath. The sound gathers everyone into stillness. Matins is approaching. In a monastery, night does not belong entirely to sleep. The brothers rise in darkness to chant, shuffling from dormitory to choir with cold feet and heavy eyelids, their day broken into hours by bells rather than sun. You imagine them now beyond the guest-house wall, men pulling on wool habits, splashing faces with cold water, finding sandals by touch, and trying to look spiritually awake before their souls have fully arrived. Even saints, you suspect, must have understood the misery of leaving a blanket before dawn. The novice comes to freshen the rushes near the door, scattering a handful of dried sweet woodruff and lavender. It lifts the room's scent for a moment, hiding the dampness beneath something meadow-like and faintly hopeful. This is one of the small kindnesses of the age floors that can be sweetened. Candles made from beeswax for those who can afford them, herbs hung against sickness, charms tucked under thresholds, little rituals against the endless invasion of cold, smell, and fear. Brother Anselm watches the covered mirror. You ask whether the abbey has always kept it hidden at night. Since before I came, he says. The infirmarian says it preserves modesty. The cook says it prevents nightmares. The oldest lay brother says a mirror left bare after midnight may show the face of the next man to die. Across the room, the carter crosses himself so quickly he nearly spills his broth. Brother Anselm's mouth tightens with something like amusement. The oldest lay brother also says onions cure earache if roasted under a full moon, so judgment is required. A soft laugh moves through the room, grateful and brief. It settles quickly. Outside, the bell continues. The monk lowers his voice and tells you that mirrors trouble monasteries in a particular way. Not because monks are more fearful than villagers, though some are, and not because they know secret things, though some enjoy giving that impression. It is because mirrors ask a question. The cloister spends a lifetime trying to soften. What are you looking at when you look at yourself? A face, a passing body, a temptation, a soul in need of polishing. Some swear that a mirror can be used for discipline, to remind the proud that skin loosens, eyes sink, and youth passes like smoke from a chimney. Others argue that no one becomes humbler by checking his own humility and polished steel. You think of the Lord's bright mirror in its carved frame, and then of this little covered one above the basin, quiet under linen. One belongs to a noble chamber, one to a guest house, but both seem wrapped in the same unease. A mirror is a tool, yes. Yet in a world where most faces are seen by others more than by themselves, such a tool feels almost intimate. It gives you back to yourself, and that can be a comfort, a vanity, or a cold surprise. The guest master snuffs one candle and leaves another burning. The half-burned wick bends in a pool of wax. Its flame flickers whenever the door breathes. You remember the rumour of burial candles in the mirror, rosemary water on a chest, a man with river mud on his face. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the girl in the Lord's hall saw prophecy, memory, or only fear wearing the shape of a reflection. The brothers' chant begins far off, muffled by stone. It is low, steady, and old, rising and falling like a river heard through sleep. The room relaxes beneath it. The merchants stop counting. The pilgrim woman closes her eyes. The carter's head sinks again toward his chest. Even the covered mirror seems less watchful while the voices move through the abbey. Brother Anselm stands, called back to the choir. Before he goes, he touches the edge of the linen cloth above the mirror, making sure it is secure. The gesture is quick, almost absent, but you notice it. He notices that you notice. Caution, he says softly, is not always belief. Then he leaves you by the fire. You sit with your bowl empty, your cloak steaming faintly, your boots turned toward the hearth. The dog from the town, or one very much like him, scratches at the guest-house door until the novice lets him in with a sigh. The animal circles twice, chooses the warmest patch of rushes, and collapses as if he has personally completed the pilgrimage of all Christendom. You almost envy him. At last, you stretch out on a bench beneath a wool blanket that smells of lanolin, smoke, and many previous travellers. The chant continues. Rain softens on the roof. The covered mirror waits above the basin, tied down by 4 little knots, plain as a loaf and strange as a dream. And just before sleep takes you, the last thing you see is the linen cloth trembling slightly in the warmth from the hearth, as though the hidden glass beneath it is breathing with the room. You wake to the bell before you understand you've been sleeping. It rolls through the abbey stones in a long bronze wave, and for a few breaths you lie still beneath the wool blanket, not sure whether the sound belongs to the room, the dream, or the wet dark behind your eyes. The hearth has sunk low. The guest house smells of ashes, damp wool, old rushes, and the faint sourness of travellers breathing together through the night. Near the door, the dog opens one eye, decides holiness is no reason to rise, and closes it again. Morning has not arrived all at once. It has only begun to gather itself beyond the narrow windows, a grey light pressing weakly against oiled cloth and horn panes. The pilgrim woman is already awake, tightening the strap of her pack. The carter with the wrapped knee mutters at his boot as if it has betrayed him. The two merchants are whispering over their coins again, because commerce, like toothache, rarely respects sacred hours. You sit up slowly. Your neck complains. The bench has left its signature along your spine, a reminder that medieval hospitality is generous in spirit and very economical in padding. Across the room, the covered mirror remains on its shelf above the basin. The linen still lies over it, knotted corners hanging motionless now that the fire has cooled. In daylight, it seems smaller, almost harmless. Yet you notice that no one removes the cloth. Brother Anselm returns after prayers with a face pale from early rising and a sleeve newly stained with ink, which suggests that even before breakfast the scriptorium has claimed him. He nods to you and says the market will be open by the time you reach the town square. The Lord's household has sent word that the mirror will not be moved until afternoon. For now, there is time to watch, listen, and purchase a little bread if your stomach has survived the monastery broth. You step outside with him into the abbey yard, where the world is washed clean but not dry. Rain beads on cart shafts and roof thatch. Hens scratch near a puddle with great seriousness. A lay brother carries 2 pails of milk across the yard, walking as carefully as a man transporting royal treasure, which, for breakfast, he nearly is. From the kitchen comes the smell of oats and onions. From the stable, the deeper smell of hay, horse, and honest labour. The abbey gate opens, and you follow the road back toward town. Morning mist rests over the fields. Frost silvering the hedge has begun to soften, dropping tiny beads of water onto the ditch. The dog follows at a distance, pretending he has business elsewhere, though his business seems to be exactly where you're walking. Brother Anselm does not send him away. Perhaps even monks understand when a creature has chosen a story. By the time you pass beneath the town gate again, the square is filling with life. Stalls rise like little wooden islands from the mud. A woman lays out eggs in straw. A butcher hangs salted meat from a hook. Fishwives arrange smoked herring and eels in neat rows, their hands red from cold. The baker's boy carries round loaves from the oven, and steam lifts from them in fragrant ghosts. Somewhere, a man argues over market tolls with the exhausted passion of someone who's already lost and intends to lose loudly. You drift among the stalls drawn by small brightnesses. Pilgrim badges gleam on a cloth scallop shells, keys of St. Peter, tiny ampulli for holy water, and stamped figures of saints whose expression suggests they have seen a great deal of bargaining and do not approve. Next to them, a charm maker sells little packets of herbs, bits of coloured thread, and lead tokens said to guard against fever, envy, toothache, night terrors, and husbands who snore. No one can quite agree whether the last charm works, but several women inspect it with interest. Then you come to the glass seller. He has set his wares beneath a striped awning, though the stripes are so faded they seem more like a memory of cheerfulness. On the table lie beads, small bottles, cloudy cups, and a few polished discs of metal wrapped in wool. Behind them, beneath his own careful hand, rests a tray of small mirrors. Some are bronze, dark and warm in colour. Some are steel, colder, sharper, polished until they catch the morning light and break it into brief flashes. One tiny glass mirror, framed in bone, is kept under a cloth until a wealthy customer asks to see it. The seller is thin, sharp-eyed, and wrapped in a fur-lined cloak that has seen better fur and better lining. He tells a gathered knot of townsfolk that a good mirror is not witchcraft, not temptation, not a devil's window, but a respectable object for respectable households. It helps a lady pin her veil, a merchant inspect his beard before meeting creditors, a barber avoid slicing an ear, and a healer examine sores without bending like a question mark. This last benefit makes a nearby barber nod solemnly, though he also looks like a man who has sliced at least one ear and blamed the lighting. A washerwoman asks why, if mirrors are so innocent, people cover them at night. The seller lifts both hands. People cover cheese from mice, he says. That does not make cheese haunted. This earns a few laughs, though not enough to empty the worry from the square. An old man with a pilgrim staff says polished things attract envy. A young apprentice says mirrors reverse the world, and anything that makes the right hand into the left cannot be entirely honest. A woman in a blue hood says her aunt saw her future husband in a basin of water on St. Agnes's Eve, though she adds that the husband turned out disappointing, so perhaps the basin was warning her. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether such love divinations are sinful, silly, or useful when families are slow at arranging marriages. Brother Anselm listens with his hands hidden in his sleeves. His expression is calm, but you notice his eyes linger on the seller's tray. The mirror in the Lord's Hall came through markets like this, passed from hand to hand, wrapped in felt, praised, priced, and blessed with whatever story made it more valuable. Perhaps it was only a luxury object. Perhaps its danger began the moment people decided it had one. A toll collector arrives then, broad-bellied and damp at the beard, demanding payment for the stall. The glass seller protests that delicate goods should be taxed delicately. The toll collector says the law does not become lighter because a man sells shiny plates. Their argument gathers a crowd immediately, because public disagreement is one of the cheapest entertainments available, and unlike bear baiting, it requires no bear. While voices rise, a small boy slips too near the tray. His sleeve brushes one of the steel mirrors. It tilts, catches the sun, and throws a bright flash across the square. For a breath, the light strikes the church wall, then the face of the charm maker, then the wet cobbles at your feet. Several people flinch. The boy freezes. The dog barks once, sharply, as if offended by theatrical lighting. Then everyone laughs too quickly. The seller rights the mirror and covers it with wool. Brother Anselm bends to pick up a pilgrim badge knocked into the mud and wipes it clean with the edge of his sleeve. It is shaped like a tiny eye surrounded by rays, meant to ward off the evil glance. He turns it over, studying the cheap stamped lead as if it might explain something. "Strange," he murmurs, "how much trouble begins with looking." You carry the thought with you as the market swells around you, bread steaming, coins clinking, hens squawking, saints glittering in lead, herbs tied in bundles, steel mirrors sleeping under wool. Above the square, on the hill beyond the roofs, the Lord's Hall waits in morning light. Its windows are pale and blank from here, giving back nothing. For now, you leave the market with the taste of coarse bread still on your tongue and the glass seller's words lingering like a splinter under the skin. People cover cheese from mice, not because cheese is haunted. It is a good joke, and a sensible one. Yet sense has a hard road in a town already warmed by rumour. Behind you, the square continues its morning business. Hens complain, coins pass, fishwives shout, and the toll collector stands like a damp monument to human irritation. Ahead, the lane climbs toward the manor hall, where smoke rises from kitchen chimneys and the pale windows look down over the town as if trying very hard to reveal nothing. Brother Anselm walks beside you, his ink-stained fingers folded inside his sleeves. The dog follows at a distance, pausing now and then to smell a post, a boot print, or some invisible legal document only dogs can read. The road to the hall is better kept than the lower lanes, packed with gravel and edged by drainage ditches, though mud still waits wherever it can. A servant carrying firewood hurries past with his hood low. 2 boys haul a basket of rushes toward the great door, fresh cut from the marshy ground beyond the mill stream, to sweeten the hall floor and hide what cannot be cleaned before guests arrive. Medieval housekeeping, your learning, is often less a victory over dirt than a negotiated truce. At the manor gate, an iron-studded oak door stands open beneath a timbered arch. A household guard knows Brother Anselm and lets you pass after one long look at your travel-stained cloak. Inside the yard, the morning is loud with work. A scullion tips ash from a pan. A woman shakes out a wool blanket. A groom rubs down a horse whose breath steams in the cold. From the kitchen comes the smell of onions, ale, roasting bones, and yesterday's smoke returning for another shift. The hall itself is long, high-roofed and dim even by day. Rushes cover the floor in uneven layers. Painted cloths hang along the walls to soften the stone and remind visitors that the Lord owns more colour than they do. At one end, a raised dais waits beneath carved beams darkened by soot. Beeswax candles burn near a small household shrine, their flames steady in the still air. A trestle table has been set for the manor court, and around it gather the steward, the household priest, 2 reeves, a clerk with a sharpened quill, several servants, and a thin noblewoman wrapped in a fur-lined mantle. The lady of the house sits near the fire, pale but upright. Her hands rest together, white against dark wool. Beside her stands a young servant girl with red-rimmed eyes and a face so tired she seems hardly older than the dawn. You understand before anyone says it, this is the steward's daughter, the one who screamed before matins, the one who saw burial candles in polished glass. No one welcomes you warmly, but Brother Anselm's presence makes room for you along the wall. You stand near a pillar where the rushes smell of lavender, straw, and old damp feet. A clerk scratches names onto parchment, pausing often to warm his fingers over a brazier. Writing in winter, you suspect, is an act of devotion equal to prayer, especially when the ink thickens and the hand goes numb. The clerk looks like a man who would confess to anything in exchange for mittens. The steward begins. His voice is careful, the voice of someone trying to preserve order before order embarrasses him publicly. The mirror, he says, is valuable property. It was placed in the lady's chamber 3 weeks ago. It was covered each evening. On the night in question, the linen was found on the floor. The girl, whose name is Maud, had entered before dawn to stir the fire. She claims the mirror showed a vision of death. Maud flinches at the word claims. The household priest murmurs that visions may come from God, from the enemy, from sickness, from fear, or from an overfull stomach. This is, admittedly, a wide net. No one can quite agree whether it comforts anyone to know there are so many possible causes for terror. The steward asks Maud to speak. She does not want to. You can see it in the way she presses her fingers into her apron, in the way her eyes find the floor and stay there. But manor courts are not built for tenderness. They are built for grain disputes, broken fences, unpaid rents, stolen hens, and the slow public sorting of blame. So she speaks in a small voice that still reaches the room. She says the chamber was dark except for the hearth. She says the linen cloth lay on the floor, though she had seen it tied over the mirror the evening before. She says the mirror shone with a light that was not the fire's light. In it she saw the chamber as if prepared for morning clean rushes, rosemary water, white cloth on the bed, candles burning at the corners, and behind her stood a man with mud on his face, river mud, black and shining, though when she turned there was no one there. A woman near the servants' door crosses herself. The priest does the same more slowly, perhaps to show professional restraint. The steward asks whether Maud touched the mirror. She says no. Whether she uncovered it? No. Whether she wished harm upon her lady? At this, the girl's face crumples. The lady speaks for the first time, quietly but sharply, and says the question is cruel. The steward bows his head, but not far. A noble woman may dislike cruelty. A steward still has to explain a costly object causing household panic, which is how bureaucracy survives even in candlelight. Then the accusation arrives from the old nurse, who stands near the hearth with a bundle of keys at her belt. She says Maud has been seen wearing a charm against envy, a little thread knot hidden under her sleeve. She says the girl's mother knew herbs. She says girls who stare too long at fine things begin to want them. Some swear that envy can stain a mirror, that a jealous glance may sour milk, crack glass, or draw illness through a keyhole. The nurse does not say Maud is a witch. She only walks around the word like a cat around spilled cream. Brother Anselm steps forward before the silence hardens. He asks to see the charm. Maud, trembling, draws back her sleeve and shows a red thread tied with 3 knots. The charm maker in the market might have sold 10 like it before breakfast. It is meant, she whispers, to ease toothache. Her jaw has pained her for 2 days. Brother Anselm nods and says many people tie knots while praying for pain to loosen. It is foolish sometimes, sinful sometimes, harmless sometimes, and useful mostly because people feel less alone while hurting, even now. It is hard to tell whether a charm is medicine, prayer, rebellion, or simply a poor person's way of asking the world to be kinder. The court breathes again. The mirror is not in the hall. It remains upstairs, locked in the lady's chamber, covered and watched. Yet it governs the room like an absent judge. Every testimony bends toward it. The priest wants it blessed. The nurse wants it removed. The steward wants someone responsible. The lady wants quiet. Maud wants to disappear into the rushes. Brother Anselm asks whether anyone else saw the cloth tied that night. 2 servants say yes. He asks whether the window was latched. A maid says the latch sticks in damp weather. He asks whether the household cat enters the chamber. The old nurse looks offended, as if cats are above suspicion, which is generous considering everything known about cats. A murmur passes through the servants. The lady's grey cat, it seems, has a fondness for shelves, cords, dangling linen, and ruining certainty. The steward dislikes this direction. A cat is an unsatisfying culprit. It cannot be fined, whipped, dismissed, or made to stand in shame before the court. The clerk also looks disappointed. Apparently cat interfered with mirror cloth lacks legal grandeur. Still, the accusation weakens. The lady rises at last, and every voice lowers. She says Maud has served faithfully. She says fear entered the chamber before blame did. Until the Lord returns, the mirror will remain covered, and no servant is to enter alone before dawn. Brother Anselm is to inspect the frame again in full light. The priest may bless the room. The nurse may keep salt at the threshold, provided she does not scatter it into the rushes where people will slip and become martyrs to household superstition. It is the most reasonable sentence you have heard all morning. The court breaks slowly. Servants drift away, whispering. The clerk sands his parchment. The dog, having somehow entered unnoticed, noses at the rushes near the door with deep legal interest. Brother Anselm gives Maud a kind nod, and she wipes her eyes with the heel of her hand, trying to look as if she has not been frightened half to pieces before breakfast. You remain by the pillar, listening to the hall return to itself, fire crackle, footstep, key ring, low voice, distant kitchen clatter. Above you, somewhere behind a locked oak door, the mirror waits under linen. And for the first time, you begin to wonder whether the chilling truth is not that mirrors show ghosts, but that once a fearful thing is seen, every person nearby begins reflecting it in their own way. You leave the manor hall while the court's murmurs are still settling into the rushes, and the cold air outside feels almost honest after so much candle-lit suspicion. The yard has grown busier. A boy carries a pail too full for his arms. A groom curses softly at a stubborn buckle, and from the kitchen doorway comes the smell of boiling bones, onions, and ale thickened into some household stew that will probably be called dinner, whether it deserves the title or not. Above, the chamber windows remain closed, pale squares set into dark timber, and somewhere behind one of them the Lord's mirror rests under linen, guarded by a priest's blessing, a nurse's salt, and possibly a cat with no respect for either. Brother Anselm does not speak as you cross the yard. His hood is pulled low, his face turned toward the gate. The dog trots at your heel now, as if the manor court has formally recognized him as part of the investigation. You suspect he is appointed himself, which is how many officials begin. Beyond the gate, the road bends away from town and follows the low fields toward a roadside shrine. The rain has returned, soft at first, then steadier, whispering on hedges and darkening the wool at your shoulders. Mud clings to your boots in patient layers. Each step makes a wet sound, and the world narrows to grey sky, brown track, winter grass, and the faint line of smoke rising from cottages behind you. The town bell sounds once, softened by rain, and then the abbey bell answers from farther off, as if the day itself is being counted by voices that never tire. Brother Anselm says the shrine lies where 3 roads meet, one toward the abbey, one toward the mill stream, and one toward the old forest track. Such places attract prayers, he says, and also arguments, because roads meeting together make people feel that unseen things may meet there too. No one can quite agree whether a crossroads is holy because travellers pray there, or uneasy because no path fully belongs to itself. The shrine appears slowly through the rain, tucked beneath a wind-bent ash tree. It is a little stone recess set on a raised base, with a painted image of the Virgin and Child protected by a small wooden roof. The paint has faded, but the blue cloak still holds in the folds, and tiny offerings lie beneath bent pins, candle stubs, a cracked bead, a strip of linen, a pilgrim badge dark with mud, and several ribbons tied to the ash branches. The ribbons hang soaked and limp, red, brown, yellow, and one pale green, fluttering only when the wind remembers them. A group of pilgrims has taken shelter there, crouched near a small smoky fire that refuses to become cheerful. One man holds his hands toward the flame. A woman with a patched cloak shares pieces of coarse bread from a cloth. Another pilgrim, older and sharp-nosed, rubs her wrists with an herb salve and says rue keeps away ill wishes, though the smell alone may keep away company. Beside them, a boy carefully turns a pair of wet shoes toward the heat, proving that faith is important. But dry feet are persuasive. You and Brother Anselm join them under the tree. The dog sits very close to the fire and looks as if he has earned it through a lifetime of moral excellence. Someone offers you bread, and you take it with gratitude. It is hard, smoky, and slightly damp, which makes it perfectly suited to the road. Brother Anselm accepts a mouthful of ale from a shared flask, wipes the rim politely, and hands it on. It does not take long for the mirror tale to arrive. Rumour travels faster than carts, faster than official messengers, and in bad weather probably faster than sin. A pilgrim with a scallop badge says he heard the mirror showed a drowned man. The sharp-nosed woman says mirrors draw wandering spirits because spirits have no weight and are easily caught by brightness. The boy says his uncle once saw a black dog in a pond and died within the year. The dog by your feet lifts his head at this slander against his profession. Brother Anselm asks whether the uncle was old. Very, the boy admits. The monk nods gently. Then the pond may not deserve all the blame. A small laugh moves around the shrine, soft as breath in rain. The sharp-nosed woman is not entirely pleased, but even she smiles into her cloak. Still, the talk continues. Some swear that mirrors should be turned to the wall during storms, because lightning seeks shining things. Others say a mirror near a cradle may make an infant restless, staring at a companion no one else can see. A woman from the hill country says brides sometimes look into polished water before marriage, hoping to glimpse the household they will enter, though those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the practice brings wisdom or only nerves. Another pilgrim says priests dislike mirrors because they reveal vanity, while old women dislike them because they reveal the truth, and both are expensive discoveries. You look toward the shrine's painted face, blurred by rain. Tiny wax stubs lie at the Virgin's feet, left by people asking for safe childbirth, healed joints, forgiven sins, found animals, fair weather, and perhaps fewer taxes, though heaven's policy on toll collectors remains unclear. In this age, the sacred and the ordinary sit side by side without embarrassment. A pilgrim badge may touch a saint's shrine and then hang beside a garlic charm. A prayer may be followed by a folk rhyme. A monk may frown at superstition while still checking that mirror cloth is tied securely before bed. The rain grows colder. You pull your cloak tighter and watch drops gather on a ribbon tied to the ash branch above you. It trembles, swells, and releases one bead at a time. Beneath it, the little offerings shine dimly in the mud. A polished pin near the shrine base catches the grey light and gives back a tiny, bent reflection of the fire. For a moment, you think of the mirror in the manor chamber. You think of Maud's frightened face, the nurse's accusing keys, the lady's tired dignity, and Brother Anselm's careful questions. Perhaps the mirror showed nothing but a servant girl's fear in a dark room. Perhaps it caught a loosened cloth, a moving cat, a candle guttering low, and turned them into prophecy. Or perhaps, in a world where every road has a shrine, and every illness has both herb and prayer, people are not wrong to feel that certain objects gather more meaning than they can safely hold. Even now, it is hard to tell whether mirrors invite spirits, or whether they simply invite stories. The pilgrims rise when the rain softens. Packs are lifted, cloaks shaken, shoes judged dry enough by medieval standards, which are not demanding. The old woman ties one more ribbon to the ash tree, murmuring a charm under her breath and then crossing herself afterward, just in case the order matters. Brother Anselm watches but does not scold. You suspect he is learning, as you are, that fear is not easily untied. The road ahead darkens toward the forest. You take one last look at the shrine, its faded blue paint, its candle stubs, its wet ribbons moving faintly in the wind. Then you follow Brother Anselm and the dog along the muddy track, leaving the town behind, while rain taps softly on your hood and the rumour of the mirror walks beside you like another traveller. You enter the forest road as the rain thins into mist and the world changes its voice around you. Behind lies the open country of fields, hedges, ditches, church bells, smoke, and quarrelsome market stalls. Ahead, the trees gather close, their wet branches knitted overhead like dark fingers trying to remember a prayer. The track narrows beneath your boots, fallen leaves, old mud, and last year's broken twigs make a soft, sucking carpet underfoot. Every step sounds muffled, as though the forest prefers its travellers quiet. Dawn has already passed, yet beneath the trees it feels earlier, colder, less certain. Pale light seeps between trunks. Mist hangs in the hollows, and drops fall from branches long after the rain has ended, pattering on your hood, your shoulders, the dog's back. He has stopped pretending he's not with you. He trots ahead now, nose low, tail level, official and self-important, as if appointed by both abbey and manor to inspect every route. Brother Anselm walks more slowly here. He keeps one hand on his satchel, where you know his wax tablets, small knife, and folded scrap of copied marks are tucked away. Before leaving the manor, he had been allowed to inspect the mirror frame again in better light, and though he spoke little afterward, you saw him trace something beneath the wood lip with his ink-darkened finger. Not letters, perhaps, not a charm, perhaps, a maker's mark, a trader's notch, or some private sign scratched by a hand long gone. No one can quite agree whether hidden marks are meant to conceal power, ownership, warning, or merely poor craftsmanship. The road dips toward a stream crossing, where a wooden cart leans at an unhappy angle. One wheel is half buried in mud, and beside it stands a man in a patched brown cloak, staring at the damage with the solemn grief of a king before a fallen castle. His mule crops wet grass nearby, indifferent to human engineering. On the cart are sacks of oats, a bundle of firewood, 2 baskets of turnips, and a cage of hens who seem to blame everyone. The carter lifts his head as you approach. His left leg drags slightly when he moves, and a strip of wool is tied around one knee. You recognize him after a moment, the dozing man from the guest house, the one who crossed himself at the old lay brother's mirror tale. He recognizes you too and greets Brother Anselm with relief so visible it is almost warm. "The wheel found a hole," he says. Brother Anselm looks at the track, the rut, the tilted cart, and the mule. The hole seems to have defended itself well. The carter sighs. It is the sound of a man who's heard wit from clergy before and would prefer a spare wheel. You help as best you can. The 3 of you unload part of the cart, setting sacks and turnips on a patch of wet grass. The dog supervises, occasionally sniffing the hens with the air of a scholar examining a troubling manuscript. The hens object. The mule continues eating, proving that peace is possible when one has no ambition. As you work, the carter tells you why he dislikes this stretch of forest. Not because of robbers, though robbers are a practical concern and less romantic when they are taking your boots. Not because of wolves, though some swear one was heard last winter beyond the charcoal burners' huts. He dislikes it because of the still water at the stream bend, there, where the bank sinks under old roots. The water lies dark and smooth beneath the trees, and travellers say it sometimes gives back the wrong face. You pause with a turnip in each hand. The carter nods toward the hollow. My grandmother said never look into forest water before prime. Dawn belongs to things returning home. Brother Anselm raises an eyebrow, and after prime. Then you may look, the carter says, but only if you have eaten. This rule has the sturdier logic of true folk wisdom. You accept it carefully. Hunger has been blamed for worse visions. Once the cart is lighter, you and Brother Anselm brace the axle while the carter wedges stones beneath the wheel. Your hands grow cold and muddy. Your sleeves darken. A thorn scratches your wrist. There is nothing graceful about medieval travel. Most of it is mud, lifting, waiting, and discovering that every object is heavier than it looked in the last village. At last the wheel groans free with a wet pop, and the cart settles onto firmer ground. The carter thanks you with almost embarrassing seriousness, and offers a strip of smoked fish wrapped in cloth. You share it near the stream, standing beneath dripping branches. The fish is salty, tough, and wonderful. Brother Anselm eats without complaint. The dog receives a small piece and immediately behaves as if this confirms a sacred covenant between species. The stream itself is narrow but deep in places, sliding brown over stones. Where it curves under the roots, the surface goes still. You do not mean to look, of course, because you do not mean to. Your eyes go there at once. For a moment, you see branches, grey sky, and the blurred shape of your hood. Then the mule shifts behind you. The water trembles and the image changes. It is still only you, you tell yourself. Only light broken by ripples. Yet in the moving surface your face appears older, longer, stranger, as if the forest has borrowed it and returned a poor copy. You step back. The carter notices but says nothing. That is almost worse. Brother Anselm kneels and touches the water with 2 fingers, breaking the reflection. A stream is a restless mirror, he says. It cannot keep a lie steady. The carter crosses himself anyway, because there is no fee for caution. You follow the road onward after helping him reload the cart. He travels with you for a while, the mule plodding behind, the wheel creaking in a rhythm that becomes strangely soothing. The forest begins to thin in places, showing pale strips of field beyond the trunks. Charcoal smoke drifts from somewhere unseen. A woodcutter's hut appears and passes, its roof mossy, its door marked with a little cross cut into the lintel to keep ill luck outside. Some swear rowan twigs above a doorway serve just as well, but no one can quite agree whether wood, iron, prayer, or habit does the better work. Most households use all 4 and call it prudence. As you walk, you think of all the reflections you have seen since dusk, the peddler's covered tray, ale in a cup, rainwater in a bucket, the monastery mirror under linen, polished pins at the shrine, the dark stream beneath roots. None has shown you a ghost. None has needed to. Each has made you aware of your own looking, your own unease, your own shape moving through a world where light is scarce and certainty scarcer. The dog trots ahead into a patch of weak sun, then turns back as if impatient with human reflection in every sense of the word. Brother Anselm's lantern, no longer lit, knocks softly against his side. The carter's wheel creaks. Somewhere far off, beyond the trees, a bell marks the hour. You leave the stream behind, but not entirely. It follows in memory, dark and smooth beneath old roots, holding your face for one breath before giving it back changed. You come out of the forest in the late afternoon, when the light has turned thin and pewter-coloured, and the world opens again into fields, hedges, and the long slope toward the Lord's keep. The road rises slowly, curling between winter bare orchards and strips of ploughed earth where crows pick at whatever the frost has spared. Behind you, the trees hold their mist like a secret. Ahead, the keep stands on its hill, not huge enough to belong in a king's song, but strong enough to make every cottage below it seem temporary. Its outer wall is patched stone, dark with rain. A square tower rises above the gate, and smoke pours from chimneys into the evening air. Torches have already been lit along the entry, though the sun has not fully gone, and their flames lean in the wind with a nervous orange flutter. You feel the days walking in your calves, the damp in your sleeves, and the particular medieval ache that comes from carrying all your belongings while pretending they are not slowly defeating you. The carter turns off toward the lower barns with many thanks, the mule with none, and the dog remains with you and Brother Anselm as if this has always been the plan. At the gate, a guard wrapped in a sheepskin cloak lifts his lantern and squints at you. He knows the monk. He does not know the dog, but after a moment appears to decide the dog is either harmless or employed by someone important. This is often how dogs enter noble households. Inside the bailey, the keepyard moves with evening labour. Servants carry baskets of firewood. A girl with red hands hauls water from the well. A smith's hammer sounds from a shed near the wall, steady and tired. Near the kitchen, geese complain at everyone with the confidence of creatures who have never doubted their own authority. The smell of supper drifts through the damp air pottage, smoked fish, onions, ale, and meat fat sizzling somewhere beyond your view. It is not elegant. But after the forest road it smells like civilization, or at least like civilization with better soup. Brother Anselm leads you toward the great hall. The door is oak, iron-banded and heavy enough to discourage both thieves and optimism. A servant opens it from within, and warmth rolls out with torch smoke and voices. You step inside. The hall is long and high, lit by hearth, candles, and iron cressets fixed to the walls. Rushes cover the floor, fresher now than in the morning, sprinkled with herbs that release a faint sweet scent beneath passing feet. Painted cloths hang along the stone, showing hunting scenes, saints, vines, and a lion that looks less majestic than surprised. At the far end, the dais table is laid with trenchers and cups. Along the lower tables, servants and household men settle into place, rubbing cold hands, shaking rain from sleeves, and pretending not to glance toward the stair that leads to the private chambers. You know what waits above. Everyone knows. The mirror is not in the hall, yet it is present in every pause. It sits inside the silence after a servant drops a spoon. It flickers in the way the household priest keeps touching the little cross at his belt. It leans behind the steward's stiff posture. The lady of the house is absent from supper, which does not improve the mood. No one can quite agree whether her absence proves illness, fear, dignity, or simply exhaustion, with people asking whether she has seen anyone dead in her furniture. You and Brother Anselm are given places near the lower end of the hall. A trencher is set before you, then pottage ladled thick with barley, peas, and scraps of salt meat. A cup of small ale follows. The dog slips under the bench and arranges himself at your feet with the quiet skill of a seasoned beggar. You break off a bit of bread and let it fall. Brother Anselm notices and says nothing, which may be mercy or monastic discipline. As supper begins, the hall settles into its old rhythm. Wooden spoons scrape bowls. A servant carries more candles. Someone near the hearth tells a low story about a miller cheating flour weights and being caught when his own donkey refused to cross the bridge. Medieval justice, it seems, sometimes depends on livestock with standards. A young page yawns so broadly that an older servant taps the back of his head and tells him demons enter through open mouths. The boy closes it at once. Some swear this warning began as theology, others as practical household management. After the meal, the steward approaches Brother Anselm. His face is narrow with worry, and his hands worry each other behind his back. The Lord has not returned. The lady refuses to sleep in her chamber while the mirror remains there. The household priest has blessed the room. The nurse has salted the threshold, and the grey cat has been shut in the pantry under protest. Still, no one wishes to carry the mirror after dark. Brother Anselm looks toward the stair. The steward says the mirror must be brought down and locked in the chest beside the hall shrine until morning. He asks the monk to witness it. He asks you to help carry a lantern. This is how your evening becomes involved with an object everyone would prefer not to touch. You climb the stair behind them. The passage above is narrower and colder than the hall. Torchlight stains the plaster walls. Your shadow stretches ahead, thin and untrustworthy. At the chamber door, the nurse waits with her ring of iron keys and a face set hard enough to sharpen knives. She unlocks the door, muttering that southern glass brings southern trouble, and steps aside. The room within is quiet. A fire burns low in the hearth. Bed curtains hang dark red in the flickering light. A chest stands beneath the window. Combs, linen bands, a little pot of herb salve, and a folded veil rest on a side table. Ordinary things made strange by fear. And near the wall, on a carved stand, covered in a linen cloth tied at all four corners, is the mirror. For a long moment no one moves. Then Brother Anselm crosses the room. He does not uncover it. He only studies the knots, the frame beneath the cloth, the way the covered shape catches the firelight without giving any back. The household priest whispers a prayer. The nurse grips her keys. You hold the lantern steady, though your hand feels less steady than you would like. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the room is frightening because of the mirror or because everyone inside has agreed it ought to be. Brother Anselm asks for the chest. Together, carefully, without looking beneath the linen, you help lift the covered mirror from its stand. It is heavier than expected, dense with wood, metal, glass, and all the dread people have laid upon it. The cloth brushes your fingers. For one breath, as you turn toward the door, the linen shifts at the lower edge. A narrow flash of glass catches the lantern. Not enough to see a face. Only light, only a brief cold gleam. Yet every person in the room stops breathing for half a heartbeat. Then the cloth falls back into place, and the mirror is dark again. You carry it down toward the hall, step by slow step, while below the hearth burns, the candles tremble, and the whole keep waits in torchlight for the covered glass to arrive. You descend the stair with the covered mirror held between you and Brother Anselm, and every step feels longer than it should. The linen cloth hangs over the carved frame, tied tight at the corners. Yet the small gleam you saw in the chamber seems to remain in the air, as if one sliver of cold light has followed you down. Below, the hall grows quieter as you approach, wooden spoons still. A cup touches the table and does not lift again. Even the geese outside have the good manners to pause, which may be the clearest sign yet that something unnatural is occurring. The steward walks ahead with a candle. The household priest follows behind, murmuring under his breath. The old nurse keeps close enough to watch the knots, her iron keys tapping softly at her belt. You carry your side of the mirror with careful hands, aware of the weight of wood, glass, metal, linen, and fear. It is not a large object. It should not feel like a coffin door. Yet by the time you reach the foot of the stair, Your shoulders are tense and your mouth has gone dry. A chest has been placed near the small household shrine at the side of the hall. It is oak, dark with age, banded in iron, and large enough to hold winter linens, silver cups, or several family secrets. Beeswax candles burn before a painted saint above it, their flames drawing thin gold lines along the wall. The saint looks down with the usual expression of patient concern, as if medieval households have been doing unreasonable things in front of holy images for centuries, and heaven has learned not to look surprised. Brother Anselm nods, and together you lower the mirror into the chest. The steward closes the lid. The old nurse locks it with a heavy key. Only then does the hall breathe again. Conversation returns in pieces, cautious and uneven. A servant laughs at nothing. A page drops a crust for the dog, who accepts it as tribute. The priest says the chest will remain sealed until morning, and the nurse says it should remain sealed until Judgment Day, which is an ambitious but administratively simple plan. The steward ignores this and orders more candles brought, because nothing says confidence like spending expensive wax against the dark. The lady of the house does not return to the hall. Instead, after some time, Brother Anselm is asked to visit her in the smaller chamber where she means to sleep. He glances at you, and you follow, not because you are important, but because you are holding the lantern again, and history often depends on whoever has not yet put the lantern down. The lady's temporary chamber lies across a passage from the solar, smaller and warmer than the room above. A brazier glows near the wall. Wool blankets have been laid over the bed, thick and fur-lined at the edges. A basin of rosemary water stands on a stool, its scent sharp and clean in the smoky air. On a low table are ordinary treasures of a nobleman's night, a bone comb, linen veils, a little pot of ointment made with beeswax and herbs, a string of prayer beads, a silver pin, and a folded cloth embroidered with blue thread. The lady sits near the brazier with her hands clasped around a cup she does not drink from. Without the wide hall around her, she seems less grand and more human, tired in the eyes, cold at the fingers, and irritated at being frightened in her own house. Maud, the steward's daughter, stands nearby with a fresh candle, no longer weeping but still pale. The old nurse hovers in the doorway, loyal, suspicious, and likely capable of outliving the keep itself. Brother Anselm bows. The lady asks whether the mirror is locked away. He says it is. She asks whether it showed him anything when uncovered earlier. He says he did not uncover it. This answer pleases no one, though it is the only answer he has. The lady looks toward the basin of rosemary water. I used to think mirrors were foolish luxuries, she says quietly. Then I owned one and became foolish with it. No one replies. She tells you, or perhaps tells the room, that at first she loved the mirror because it was so clear, clearer than polished bronze, clearer than water. It showed the exact line of a veil, the powder caught at the edge of the hair, the redness of tired eyes, the small signs of illness before others noticed. It helped her arrange herself for feast days, receive guests, inspect a rash near her jaw, and see whether the cold had cracked her lips. A practical object, she insists, a useful thing. Then, after her husband left for the boundary dispute and winter settled hard round the hall, she began to look more often, not long, not vainly, she says, though the nurse makes a tiny sound that suggests this is not for witnesses to decide. The lady saw grey near her temples, a hollow under the cheek, a thinness in the skin. Nothing remarkable, perhaps, only time doing its quiet work. Yet in a world where painted saints do not age, and young brides are praised as if spring will last forever. A clear mirror can feel less like a tool and more like a messenger with poor manners. Some swear that too much looking invites melancholy. Others say a woman's beauty may be charmed away by envy if her reflection is left exposed. There are tales of girls washing in dew to preserve fairness, of noble women sleeping with sachets of lavender against bad dreams, of elderflower water for the complexion, of leeches used to balance humours, of amulets worn under linen against the evil eye. No one can quite agree whether these customs are remedies, hopes, habits, or bargains made with fear. Maud shifts beside the candle. The lady sees it and softens. She saw what I feared. The lady says, that may be all. Brother Anselm asks what she feared. The lady smiles faintly, without humour. What every woman in a cold house fears when her husband is away. The roads are wet, the river is high, servants whisper, and every bell sounds like news. Outside the chamber, wind moves under the eaves. You think of the muddy man Maud described, standing behind her in the mirror, river mud on his face, a room prepared for mourning, rosemary water, fresh rushes, burial candles. Yet here is rosemary water again, not for death, but for comfort. Fresh rushes in the hall, not for a corpse, but because supper required dignity. Candles everywhere, because winter evenings are dark. A mirror may have gathered ordinary things and arranged them into dread. Even now, it is hard to tell whether Maud saw the future, or only the household's fears reflected in one sharp surface. The old nurse mutters that glass remembers. Brother Anselm turns to her, gently, and asks what she means. She says she had a cousin who worked in a plague house years ago, and every mirror there was covered because the dying would reach toward their own faces as if calling someone through. She says objects kept near death carry a chill afterward. She says the Lord's mirror was traded through too many hands for anyone to know what it had witnessed. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether objects remember sorrow, but many households act as though they do. They keep a dead man's knife wrapped away. They avoid a bed where fever took someone. They bless a threshold after a difficult birth. They burn herbs in rooms where bad news has sat too long. The lady grows still at that. Brother Anselm asks where the mirror was bought before her brother acquired it. She does not know. A port, a merchant house, a sale after a death. Perhaps. Fine things often travel when families fall into debt, and the grief of one household may become the ornament of another. The candle in Maud's hand gutters. For an instant its flame bends toward the basin, and the water gives back a trembling shape the lady seated, the monk standing, your lantern, the nurse in the doorway, all of you wavering in a shallow bowl scented with rosemary. No one cries out, no one moves, the water is only water. Still, Maud looks away. Brother Anselm steps gently between her and the basin, breaking the reflection with his shadow. He tells the lady the mirror will be inspected again by daylight, the marks copied, the frame examined, the merchant questioned if he can be found. Until then, the covered glass will remain in the chest. The lady nods, not satisfied, but steadier. You leave the chamber after the monk carrying the lantern low. In the passage, the old nurse locks the door behind you with a decisive turn of iron. Below, the hall has resumed its murmur, though softer now. The dog sleeps by the hearth. The chest sits near the shrine, dark and silent beneath the saint's painted gaze. And as the night deepens around the keep, you begin to understand that the mirror's chill lies not only in what it might show, but in how clearly it teaches everyone to see the fear already waiting in themselves. You return to the hall with Brother Anselm, and the air below seems thicker than before, warmed by bodies, hearth smoke, and all the words people are trying not to say. The chest remains near the household shrine, its iron bands dark in the candlelight. A painted saint watches over it with one hand raised in blessing, though from where you stand the saint's long, solemn face appears less certain than earlier. Perhaps the painter meant holiness. Perhaps he simply had little practice with cheerful expressions. The steward has ordered a bench placed before the chest, and the household priest sits there as guard, prayer beads moving slowly through his fingers. He is not old, but worry has made temporary age of him. His lips move, every so often. His gaze flicks toward the locked lid, then back to the painted saint, as if comparing authority. The old nurse sits nearby with her keys in her lap, guarding him as much as the mirror, and every servant who passes gives the chest a respectful distance. Even the dog has chosen the opposite side of the hearth, though this may have more to do with spilled grease than theology. Brother Anselm asks for parchment, light, and a quiet table. The steward gives him all three with the speed of a man eager to turn fear into procedure. Soon you sit with the monk near a sideboard beneath a wall hanging of St. George, whose painted horse looks more confused than brave. The hall's noise thins around you. The monk unfolds a small scrap of waxed parchment where he has copied the hidden marks from the mirror's frame. They are shallow, uneven signs scratched into the wood beneath the lower lip, where no one would see them unless searching. You hold the lantern close. There are 5 marks. Not letters, you know. Not quite. One resembles a crooked cross. Another looks like a hook. A third may be a merchant's tally. The last 2 are small, repeated cuts, almost like a pair of eyes if you're willing to be nervous and imaginative, which the evening has made very easy. No one can quite agree whether symbols become powerful because someone intends them to be, or because later eyes decide they must be. Brother Anselm studies them for a long while. His ink-stained finger hovers over the copied shapes without touching the wet ink. He says the marks may be from a maker, a shipper, a pawnbroker, or a household inventory. Fine objects pass through many ledgers before they pass through fear. A mirror may be marked for weight, origin, tax, workshop, price, or ownership. Yet the crooked cross troubles him. It is not a church cross, he says, not properly made. Though improper crosses are common enough among folk charms, boundary marks, and hurried prayers scratched by people who want heaven's help but have limited time and worse penmanship. The household priest leans in despite himself. He says a relic may help. This is how you come to see the little reliquary no one quite trusts. It is brought from the chapel by a sleepy novice attached to the keep's priest, a thin boy with a candle in one hand and a small wooden casket in the other. The casket is no larger than a loaf, covered in worn gilding and set with cloudy bits of coloured glass. Inside, the priest says, is a thread from the cloak of St. Winifred, or perhaps St. Margaret, depending on which older inventory is believed. Those who tell the tale never fully agree because the first parchment was damaged by mice, and the second was written by a clerk with strong faith and weak spelling. The priest places the reliquary on the table. Everyone nearby lowers their voices. Even objects of uncertain origin deserve manners when they have survived this long in a chapel. The priest explains that the relic has been carried through sick rooms, placed near birthing beds, touched to fevered brows, and held during storms when lightning worried the tower. It is said to have stopped a child's bleeding nose, calmed a cow that would not calve, and once revealed a thief because he sneezed when asked to swear before it. Brother Anselm listens politely, though his expression suggests that saints may perform miracles, while dust, guilt, and pepper also deserve consideration. Still, he does not mock the relic. In this world, Belief is not a simple thing to laugh at. A relic can be holy, doubtful, useful, misnamed, loved, and comforting all at once. It can gather the prayers of generations until even uncertainty becomes soft from handling. You see the priest's fingers rest on the little casket with tenderness, and you understand that for him it is not merely proof, it is company. The priest proposes placing the relic upon the chest overnight. The nurse approves. The steward looks relieved. Brother Anselm says gently that if the relic comforts the household, it may rest there, though a locked chest and a sober watchman are also excellent aids against trouble. This wins him a narrow look from the nurse. Some people dislike practical miracles because they require less incense. A half-burned candle is fetched from the chapel as well, one used in prayers earlier that evening. The priest lights it from the shrine flame and sets it beside the reliquary. Its wax is soft, uneven, and already bent to one side. The little flame shivers in the hall's draught, throwing light against the copied marks on Brother Anselm's parchment. For a moment, the crooked cross seems to move. You blink, and it is still. Brother Anselm sees you blink. "Fire edits everything," he murmurs. The words settle in you. Fire edits faces, rooms, fears, and polished glass. A candle beside a mirror can stretch a shadow into a figure, turn a bowl of water into a mourning basin, make a linen cloth seem to breathe, and give a scratch the dignity of a sign. Yet this explanation, sensible as it is, does not empty the room of unease. It only gives unease a chair and asks it to sit more quietly. The priest, perhaps sensing that reason has entered too far into the evening, tells an older story. He says that years ago, before this lady came to the keep, a knight returned from war with a polished shield so bright that his wife covered it after seeing herself beside him in the hall, not because she feared vanity, but because she said another face leaned near her husband's shoulder whenever the shield caught candlelight. A dead companion, some said, a battlefield friend, or perhaps a servant standing behind them and later improved by memory. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the story belongs to the shield, the war, the wife, or the long grief men carry home without knowing where to put it. The nurse nods at this as if it proves everything. Brother Anselm asks whether the shield remains in the keep. The priest admits it rusted in the armoury. This disappoints the nurse greatly. You sit back as the hall grows later. The tables are cleared. Servants sweep crumbs into the rushes, where mice, dogs, and tomorrow's broom will negotiate the rest. A boy carries trenchers away in a basket. The steward checks the door bars twice. Outside, wind presses against the shutters. The abbey bell is too far to hear now, but you imagine it sounding over wet fields, keeping its own patient time. Brother Anselm copies the marks once more, cleaner this time. He writes a note beside them in Latin, then one in plain speech for the steward, explaining that the mirror's frame may have been marked by traders or previous owners and should not be taken as proof of sorcery, prophecy, or household guilt. The steward looks grateful and slightly saddened. A clear answer would be useful. A mysterious object with no culprit is poor material for authority. At last, the relic is placed atop the chest. The half-burned candle rests beside it in a brass holder. The priest begins his watch. The nurse settles in with her keys. Brother Anselm folds his notes into his satchel. You stand a moment before the household shrine, feeling the warmth of the candle on your knuckles. There is the chest. There is the doubtful relic. There is the painted saint. There is the locked mirror inside, covered and silent. Around it gather a prayer, suspicion, reason, custom, and fatigue. all layered as thick as the rushes on the floor. And you think, with a tired softness, that perhaps every age keeps such chests places where it locks away what it cannot explain, sets a holy thing on top, lights a candle, and waits for morning. You're given a place to rest near the hall after the candle watch is set, but sleep does not come cleanly. It comes in scraps, like wool caught on thorns. The hall settles around you by slow degrees, footsteps fading, benches shifting, the last bowls carried away, the hearth sinking from flame to red pulse. Somewhere near the shrine, the priest murmurs prayer after prayer, and the old nurse's keys answer now and then with a small iron clink. The relic sits above the locked chest. The half-burned candle leans in its brass cup. Beneath both, the mirror waits in darkness, wrapped in linen, as though darkness has ever needed help. You lie beneath a rough wool blanket on a bench that seems designed by someone who believed comfort weakened the character. The dog sleeps below you, warm against your dangling hand. Once, in the night, you wake to hear wind beating at the shutters and think for one confused breath that someone is scratching at the chest. But it is only the fire shifting, or a mouse behind the wainscot, or your own mind continuing its work after you'd politely asked it to stop. Before dawn, Brother Anselm touches your shoulder. You open your eyes to a dim hall and the smell of cold ashes. The priest is still awake, though barely. The nurse is asleep sitting upright, which seems less like rest than a threat paused in human form. The candle has burned lower, a soft lump of wax gathered around its base. The chest remains locked. The relic remains on top. No face has appeared. No cry has risen. No spirit has knocked politely to be admitted. Medieval nights, even fearful ones, still contain a great deal of waiting. Brother Anselm gestures for you to follow. The steward has remembered something, or rather, one of the servants has remembered it for him after being pressed, scolded, and promised that truth may be safer than silence. There is a woman in the lower household, an older kitchen servant named Eleanor, who once worked in the port town where the lady's brother bought the mirror. She has not spoken because old servants know that knowledge is a dangerous possession too little, and you are useless, too much. And you're interesting to the wrong people. You descend from the hall into the service passage, where the air grows colder and smells of stone, ale barrels, damp wood, and stored food. A boy with sleep-flattened hair carries a candle before you, yawning so widely that you remember the page's warning about demons entering open mouths. If demons truly seek such doors, medieval households must be draughty with them before breakfast. The passage opens into the winter storehouse. Here, the keep's life is stacked against hunger. Barrels line one wall, marked with chalk and soot. Sacks of oats and barley are piled on wooden pallets to keep them from the damp. Smoked fish hang from hooks, stiff and silver brown. Strings of onions, garlic, and dried herbs sway gently from beams blackened by old smoke. Wheels of cheese rest under cloth. Salted meat lies packed in tubs. Loaves gone hard for trenchers sit in baskets like small defeated stones. It is not beautiful, exactly, but it is precious. In winter, a storehouse is a kind of treasury, and every mouse is a tiny criminal with whiskers. Eleanor waits near the fishhooks, wrapped in a brown cloak over her night shift, her hair hidden beneath a linen cap. Her face is lined, sharp, and wary. The steward stands beside her with the expression of a man trying to look patient while not feeling any such thing. Brother Anselm greets her softly, not as a judge, but as someone asking directions on a difficult road. At first, she says little. She saw mirrors in the port town. Yes, Fine goods came through there: cloth, spices, glass cups, painted boxes, knives, beads, and foolish things for those with more coin than winter sense. No one can quite agree whether foreign luxuries are dangerous because they are foreign, or merely blamed because they are easier to mistrust than neighbours. Then Brother Anselm shows her the copied marks. Eleanor's eyes change. She will not touch the parchment. She only leans close and breathes in through her nose. The crooked cross, the hook, the paired cuts. She has seen such marks before, she says. Not on a devil's mirror, not on a witch's tool, on goods sold from a house emptied after plague. The storehouse seems to grow colder around that word. Plague is not spoken lightly. Even when years have passed, it remains in walls, in memory, in the habit of stepping away from a cough. Eleanor says that in the port town, when sickness took a household, officials marked goods before sale. Some were burned, some were blessed, some were washed with vinegar, smoked with herbs, aired in yards, then sold to recover debts. The marks showed which broker handled them, which priest had inspected them, or which family account they belonged to. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether such goods carry danger afterward, but fear travels more faithfully than illness sometimes. She remembers a merchant's widow, a good house near the quay, a chamber where all mirrors were covered when the fever came, because the dying were said to reach toward reflections. A daughter had owned a fine glass mirror with flowers painted round the edge. After the household emptied, the goods were taken, sorted, marked, and sold. Eleanor never knew where the mirror went. She only remembers the painted flowers, red and blue, and the gossip that the widow saw her dead husband standing behind her in the glass before she herself took fever. The steward crosses himself. The boy with the candle does the same, delayed but enthusiastic. Brother Anselm asks whether the mirror was cursed. Eleanor gives him a tired look. Father, a house with plague needs no curse added. There is no answer to that. For a while only the hanging fish move gently in the draught. The dog noses at a sack of barley and is quietly redirected by your foot before he becomes part of a legal dispute. Outside the storehouse door, someone coughs in the passage, and everyone hears it too clearly. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the mirror brought anything with it except memory. Perhaps it passed through sickness, sale, salt, smoke, blessing, bargaining, and ship's holds before entering the lady's chamber. Perhaps Maud saw not prophecy but the shape of an old story clinging to a beautiful object-covered glass. Rosemary water, morning candles, river mud from the quay, grief polished until it reflected whoever stood before it. The steward wants this kept quiet. Brother Anselm says truth kept too tightly often ferments. Eleanor says truth told too widely often gets a poor woman blamed. Both are right, which is the least convenient form of wisdom. At last, Brother Anselm folds the copied marks away. He says the mirror should be removed from the lady's chamber, perhaps given to the abbey for safekeeping, or sold only with its history told plainly. The steward winces at the thought of lost value. Eleanor looks at him as if value is a small word men use when they have not watched a household vanish. You leave the storehouse as dawn begins to blue the narrow windows. Behind you remain the barrels, smoked fish, coarse bread, onions, and the old woman's secret, hanging in the cold like breath. Above, in the hall, the chest still holds the mirror, but now it seems less like a gate for spirits, and more like a shallow grave for other people's fear, dug in glass and carried from house to house. You leave the winter storehouse with the smell of smoked fish and cold barrels still clinging to your cloak, and the dawn outside has become a pale, thin thing, spread over the keep yard like watered milk. Servants move through it in quiet haste. A girl scatters grain for hens. A man carries split logs toward the kitchen door. Somewhere behind you, the steward is already deciding which parts of the truth may be spoken without damaging the value of expensive glass, which is a very medieval form of arithmetic and not an especially holy one. Brother Anselm walks with you across the yard, his satchel tucked close beneath his arm. The dog follows, yawning so widely that he appears to contain half the morning at the well. Maud stands with a wooden pail, her red thread still tied beneath her sleeve. She looks tired, but less broken than before. When Brother Anselm tells her that the mirror may have come from a plague-empty house, her face changes, not into relief exactly, but into the sad calm of someone discovering that fear had a history before it chose her. No prophecy, then, she asks. No certain prophecy, the monk answers. In this world that is almost comfort. Before the hour grows late, you leave the keep by the lower gate, following the pilgrim road that runs beyond the hill toward the Abbey Bridge and the farther country. The mirror remains locked in the chest behind you for now, under the doubtful relic and the half-burned candle. The steward has promised it will be sent under guard to the abbey after the midday meal, once the Lord's men can spare a cart. No one can quite agree whether this is prudence, delay, or a household trying to move its fear onto someone else's shelf. The road is hard with morning frost in the shaded places and soft with mud wherever the sun touches it. Your boots find both conditions often enough to make the walk interesting in the least pleasant sense. The fields lie quiet, the hedges black and bare, the ditches filmed with thin ice. Smoke rises straight from cottage roofs until the breeze takes it apart. Behind you, the keep shrinks into a dark shape on its hill, and ahead, the road bends toward low meadows where the river mist lies waiting. A few travellers join your path. There is the sharp-nosed pilgrim woman from the shrine, walking with her staff and smelling faintly of rue. There is a young man carrying a bundle of wool to market beyond the abbey. There is an old soldier with a scar through one eyebrow, though he speaks gently to his donkey, and therefore seems less dangerous than the donkey, who has opinions about puddles. Together you move in that loose company common to medieval roads, where strangers become temporary neighbours because wolves, thieves, mud, and boredom are all improved by witnesses. At a sheltered bend, where a hawthorn hedge breaks the wind, the group stops to share food. Someone produces coarse bread, someone else has a little cheese wrapped in cloth. The soldier offers smoked fish so salty it feels as if the sea has become personally involved. Brother Anselm shares a small handful of dried apples from the abbey store, and for a few quiet minutes, everyone chews in the weak sun while breath steams in the air. The talk returns, as talk does, to the mirror. The young wool carrier says reflected light can guide a soul if held toward a saint's shrine. His grandmother told him that a polished plate placed near a dying person might help the soul see the road to heaven. The sharp-nosed woman disagrees sharply enough to frighten a crow from the hedge. She says mirrors near the dying confuse the soul and make it circle back into the room, which is why sensible people cover them. The old soldier says both may be true, depending on the soul, the mirror, and whether the person holding it has clean hands. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, but everyone has heard something. Some say sunlight flashing from a mirror can signal across fields, calling help or warning of raiders. Others say moonlight in a mirror is unlucky because the moon already governs madness, tides, and people who make poor decisions after supper. A woman once told the pilgrim that a mirror buried under a threshold could turn away envy. Brother Anselm says thresholds already have enough work with boots, dogs, and tax collectors, and perhaps should not be burdened with glass. The dog, hearing his profession mentioned, lifts his head from your boot and looks wise. You sit with your back against the hedge and watch the low winter sun brighten a patch of ice in the ditch. The surface shines for a moment like dull metal. It gives back no clear face, only light, reeds, and sky broken into pale pieces. You think again of Maud's vision burial candles, rosemary water, fresh rushes, river mud, all ordinary things, all frightening when gathered in the wrong order. Perhaps reflected light is like a road sign written in a language fear already knows. Even now, it is hard to tell whether a mirror guides, misleads, warns, tempts, or merely waits for human eyes to do the rest. The old soldier tells a tale from a campaign years earlier, when men polished their shields not for vanity, but to blind an enemy at sunrise. He says one frightened boy saw his own face in his shield before battle and took it for a ghost. He ran, survived, and later became a baker, which the soldier considers a better use of the boy. The sharp-nosed woman says cowardice invites judgment. The soldier shrugs. So does courage, he says. Only courage gets songs first. The road calls you onward after the food is gone. You rise stiffly, brush crumbs from your cloak, and continue toward the river. The abbey bell sounds faintly ahead, marking the hour with slow bronze patience. Fields widen, the mist thins and gathers again. Somewhere beyond it lies the bridge, and beyond the bridge, the abbey where the mirror is meant to be taken. For now, you walk with the little company, warmed by bread, chilled by wind, and followed by the thought of a covered glass travelling behind you, carrying old death, new fear, and the strange human habit of searching every shining surface for a sign. You reach the Abbey Bridge as the afternoon begins to lean toward evening, and the river below it moves with a slow brown strength, swollen by days of rain. Mist gathers low over the water, winding between the reeds and the alder trunks, softening the far bank until the world seems unfinished there. The bridge itself is narrow, built of old stone with the timber rail patched in several places, and at its middle stands a little niche containing a weathered saint whose nose has long ago surrendered to weather, birds, and perhaps one very determined sinner. The road narrows before the bridge, and this is where all movement has stopped. A cart stands crooked at the near end, one wheel sunk deep in a rut where the track has collapsed into river mud. The horse in its traces stamps and tosses its head, steaming in the cold air. Two household men from the keep argue with the driver. A third man holds a lantern though daylight remains, perhaps because the covered thing in the cart seems to demand ceremony. Beneath a tied linen sheet and a layer of wool padding lies the mirror, brought at last from the hall chest. From beneath the doubtful relic, from the reach of the lady's fear. The old nurse stands beside the cart with her keys at her belt and her mouth drawn into a line of pure disapproval. The steward is there too, mud on his boots and worry on his brow, looking as if he has followed the mirror only to make sure it becomes someone else's problem correctly. Maud stands a little apart, holding a small bundle of linen against her chest. When she sees Brother Anselm, her shoulders lower, just a little. The dog reaches the scene before anyone else and begins inspecting the broken wheel with grave confidence. He sniffs the axle, the rut, the horse's hoof, and one household man's boot, then sits down as if ready to deliver judgment. Medieval courts might improve with more dogs, you think, though the sentencing would involve far too many bones. Brother Anselm approaches the cart, the wheel, he asks. Same as all wheels, the driver mutters, sound until needed. This is difficult to argue with. You help because that is what roads ask of travellers. The sharp-nosed pilgrim woman braces her staff and offers advice. The old soldier removes his cloak and sets his shoulder to the cart. The wool carrier gathers stones from the verge. The steward protests that the mirror must not be jostled, which is exactly the sort of warning people give when everyone is already jostling everything. The horse stamps again, offended by the river, the mud, and possibly the steward. Together, you unload what can be moved. A chest of household linens comes down first, then a small coffer, then a sack of oats meant for the abbey stable. The mirror remains in place, covered and tied. No one wants to lift it onto the ground near the river. No one says why. The river says enough for all of you, moving below the stones with its dark, patient voice. Mist curls around your ankles. The abbey bell sounds from beyond the far bank, deep and slow. Its note crosses the river and trembles in the wet air. For a moment, with the cart leaning, the horse breathing, the covered mirror waiting, and the bell sounding through mist. Everything seems arranged exactly like a story people will later improve beyond usefulness. No one can quite agree whether such moments feel fated because they are, or because human memory likes to put a frame around them afterward. The wheel finally lifts free with a wet sucking sound. Mud releases it reluctantly, as though the earth had grown fond of property. The old soldier laughs softly. The steward does not. Brother Anselm wipes mud from his sleeve and asks the driver to move slowly across the bridge once the cart is steadied. The driver nods, pale now, glancing at the linen-covered shape. Then Maud steps forward. She says she brought something from the lady's chamber, from her bundle. She draws a folded square of clean cloth and a small sprig of rosemary. The lady asks that they be carried with the mirror, not as a charm exactly, and not as a confession, but as a courtesy to whatever grief might have travelled with it. The old nurse sniffs and says rosemary has always been proper in rooms of sickness and mourning. Brother Anselm says it is also proper in kitchens, which proves, perhaps, that remembrance and stew are closer neighbours than scholars admit. Maud tucks the rosemary beneath one of the linen ties. The gesture is small, no light flashes, no voice rises from the river. The horse only blows through its nose, unimpressed by symbolism. Yet the air changes, not because fear vanishes, but because someone has given it a gentler task. The mirror is no longer only an object to be accused, hidden, blessed, locked, and moved. It has become something carried with a history, and history, when admitted, often grow less hungry. The cart begins across the bridge. You walk beside it with Brother Anselm, one hand near the rail. The river moves below, dark between the stones. Halfway across, the mist opens, and for one breath the water reflects the cart, the horse, the monk, the steward, Maud, the nurse, the dog, and you. All of you ripple together, bent by the current. The covered mirror cannot reflect anything from beneath its cloth, but the river reflects the whole company carrying it. Then the current breaks the image apart. The dog barks once at the water, perhaps offended to see himself made so wavy. On the far side, Abbey lay brothers wait with lanterns. The mirror is taken down carefully and carried through the gate toward the guest house passage, then beyond it, toward a small locked room near the infirmary where the abbey keeps tools, spare candles, old account rolls, and objects whose owners would rather not think about them after dark. The doubtful relic has not come with it. The half-burned candle remains at the keep. The chest is gone. Only the mirror, its linen cover, and the rosemary travel onward. As the abbey gate closes, the steward signs a record with the clerk, pressing his seal into wax. Brother Anselm writes a note beneath it in his steady hand mirror received. Covered, marked, origin uncertain. no charge laid against Maud. The last phrase matters most. You see Maud read it, or try to, and when Brother Anselm tells her what it says, she lowers her face and breathes out as if she's been carrying the cartwheel herself. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the mirror ever showed anything supernatural at all, but it has revealed fear, blame, memory, grief, vanity, trade, sickness, and mercy, which is quite a lot for one small pane of glass. Evening settles over the abbey yard. The dog shakes river mist from his coat and trots toward the kitchen, as though the entire journey has been undertaken for supper. Brother Anselm watches the locked room door for a moment, then turns away. The bell begins again, calling the brothers toward prayer, calling travellers toward benches, calling the day gently into darkness. You follow its sound across the wet stones, leaving the covered mirror behind a locked oak door, where it waits without shining. You return to the guest house as night gathers over the abbey, and the old stones seem to exhale the day's dampness into the dark. The yard lies quiet now except for the soft movement of lay brothers crossing between buildings, their lanterns bobbing like low stars caught in human hands. Above the cloister roof, smoke rises from the kitchen chimney and folds itself into the mist. The bell has finished its calling, but its last note seems to remain in the walls, deep and gentle, as if the abbey itself is still remembering the sound. Inside the guest house, the fire has been built up for evening. It does not blaze. Nothing here wastes itself on grandeur. It glows steadily beneath blackened beams, sending warmth across the stone floor and into the benches where travellers settle with bowls in their hands. Fresh rushes have been scattered near the hearth, mixed with lavender and a little dried mint, and the scent lifts faintly whenever someone shifts a boot. Your cloak steams on a peg. Your hands, cold from bridge mist and river air, slowly remember their shape around a wooden cup of small ale. The dog lies in the best place, of course, stretched near the fire with the confidence of a creature who has solved the entire mystery and found it edible. A novice steps around him with a bowl of broth and nearly trips, then whispers something unmonastic under his breath. Brother Anselm hears and does not turn, which may be mercy, fatigue, or the knowledge that even novices must develop spiritually at a reasonable pace. The mirror is not in the room. That absence gives the guest house a softer shape. Still, you know where it rests beyond the passage, past the infirmary shelves with jars of honey, vinegar, dried comfrey, sage, and linen bandages, beyond a locked oak door, beneath its linen cover, with a sprig of rosemary tucked at one corner. It shines for no one now. It offers no face, no candle-lit chamber, no blurred prophecy, no river-mud stranger. It is simply there, held in darkness by stone, wood, cloth, and the careful patience of people who have chosen not to stare. Brother Anselm sits beside you with his notes folded away. His ink-stained fingers are clean only in the places where ink has not yet returned. He eats a bowl of barley pottage slowly, with the solemn focus of a man who missed several meals in service of a troublesome object. Across the fire, Maud sits with the sharp-nosed pilgrim woman and the old soldier, warming her hands. She's been allowed to sleep at the abbey tonight before returning to the keep at dawn. No one says she was saved from blame. No one needs to. The space around her is calmer than it was in the hall. The steward has gone back before dark. The old nurse returned with him, after telling Brother Anselm 3 times that rosemary alone would not settle the matter, and that if the mirror began knocking from inside the locked room he was not to come complaining to her. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether she was frightened or disappointed to leave the glass behind. Perhaps both. Fear, like pottage, often contains whatever scraps the day has provided. The guestmaster speaks of ordinary things while serving bread a leaking roof near the stable, a mule with a swollen hoof, a missing kitchen knife, a brother whose cough may need honeyed ale. Ordinary troubles return quickly once extraordinary ones are locked away. This is one of the quiet truths of the medieval world. Bells still mark the hours, oats still need measuring, rushes still sour underfoot, market tolls still offend everyone equally. The body still asks for warmth, food, and sleep. Even after standing near a mystery, you ask Brother Anselm softly what he thinks the mirror truly showed. He watches the fire for a while before answering. No one can quite agree whether truth lives in the glass, he says, or in the one who looks. It is not the kind of answer that ends a tale cleanly. It is the kind that survives one. He says Maud may have seen candlelight, water, linen, her lady's fear, an old story of plague, and the shape of grief carried through trade from a porthouse to a noble chamber. She may have seen a trick of flame, or a memory learned from whispers before she knew she'd heard them. She may also have seen something he cannot name. A monk, he says, should be careful not to call every dark corner empty simply because he has brought a lamp. Even now, it is hard to tell whether wisdom is disbelief, belief, or the humility to walk between them without making too much noise. The fire settles lower, a log breaks softly, sparks climb and vanish among the rafters. You think of all the places the journey has carried you: the muddy gate at dusk, the smoky alehouse, the ink-smelling abbey, the morning market flashing with polished metal, the manor court with its frightened girl, the roadside shrine trembling with ribbons, the forest stream giving back a stranger version of your face, the torchlit hall, the lady's chamber, the doubtful relic, the winter storehouse, the frozen pilgrim road, the broken cart at the bridge, the river reflecting everyone at once. Each place held a mirror of its own, though not always made of glass. The town reflected rumour, the court reflected blame, the shrine reflected hope, the stream reflected unease, the storehouse reflected memory, the abbey, perhaps, reflects patience. And you, sitting here beneath wool and smoke, reflect the day quietly back into yourself. The little covered mirror above the guest house basin has been left under linen again. Its 4 knots hang still. Earlier, it seemed ominous. Now it seems almost kind. A covered thing is not always hidden because it is wicked. Sometimes it is covered because people need rest from looking. Sometimes the soul, like the eyes, asks for darkness. Brother Anselm rises when the bell calls him again. Before leaving, he places one hand briefly on the table. Sleep, he says. Morning will make fewer shadows. This may not always be true, but tonight it is gentle enough to accept. You stretch out near the hearth beneath a wool blanket, with the dog pressed warmly against the bench below. Around you, travellers lower their voices. The pilgrim woman murmurs a prayer. Maud lies facing the fire, the red thread at her wrist loosened but not removed. The half-burned candle from the keep is far away now. The doubtful relic returned to its chapel, the broken cart repaired, the suspicious monk less suspicious than tired. Outside, mist thickens over the river and fields. The abbey bell fades. The locked mirror waits in darkness, holding whatever it holds, showing nothing to no one. And for once, that is enough. The room grows softer. The fire becomes a bed of red coals. The beams above lose their edges. Rain begins again, very lightly, touching the roof with small patient fingers. You breathe in smoke, lavender, wool, and warm bread. The medieval night gathers close, not as a threat now, but as a heavy curtain drawn against the cold. No one asks the mirror for answers. No one uncovers the glass. No one sees a face except in memory. You let your eyes close while the old world settles around you: stone, straw, candle, bell, river, dog, cloak, sleep. And the darkness at last reflects nothing at all. The fire lowers itself into a quieter glow, and the room follows it down. Sounds become fewer, gentler, farther apart. A bowl is set aside. A bench creaks once. Someone sighs into sleep. The dog turns in a small circle of dreams and rests his chin upon his paws. Beyond the wall, the abbey stones hold the day's cold on one side and the hearth's warmth on the other, and you lie in the narrow mercy between them. There is nothing more you need to solve tonight. The mirror can remain covered. The river can move unseen beneath its mist. The bell can wait inside its tower until the next hour finds it. Even the old fears, the ones tied in knots, scratched in frames, carried through markets, whispered at shrines, and stirred into candlelight, seem tired now. They loosen their hands. They step back from the bed. You're only a traveller in a wool blanket, with mud drying on your boots and warmth returning slowly to your fingers. The rushes smell faintly sweet beneath the smoke. The last candle bends, brightens, then steadies. Somewhere in the darkness, Brother Anselm chants with the others, his voice folded into many voices, none of them hurried, none of them sharp. Their song passes through the stone like low water. So you let the old hall fade, you let the road fade, you let the covered glass fade behind its locked door, harmless in the dark because no eye is asking it to speak. The night becomes simple again. Breath in, breath out. Warmth near, cold far, rain above, earth below. And as sleep comes softly over you, the medieval world grows still, dim and kind, until even the bells seem to whisper from very far away,